What is NAATI? Why do we need a translator? When do we need one? What is an interpreter? What's the difference between these two words? Are these two words interchangeable? Yes, no, maybe, it depends. More on that on today's episode. Good day guys, welcome to episode 117 of the Teacher Emilio podcast. I am your host, Teacher Emilio, and since I've recently become a fully certified translator, I thought it would be good to let you all know about the differences between a translator and an interpreter, as well as different situations when you may need one, why you may need one, and also to talk a bit about what NAATI is. So to get started, let's say that NAATI stands for National Accreditation Authority of Translators and Interpreters. This is basically an organization Australia-wide who regulates the profession, that makes sure that basically anyone who has a NAATI certification is up to a certain standard in terms of translation and interpreting. Just to give you one quick example of how they regulate the profession, I would say back in 2017 when I started becoming a translator, I remember that anybody could just go and basically sit a translation test, but now this has changed. If anybody wants to become NAATI certified for either a translator or an interpreter, now anybody cannot just walk in and do the exam. That person, before sitting the exam, has to show NAATI, has to show the organization that they have completed a specific course, to basically say to them, hey, not only I think I am proficient, that I have good control in these two languages, I have also done some qualifications, or I have some qualifications basically, that show that I understand how the Australian system works, because you know, when you do these courses, you learn about the code of ethics and a lot of different aspects of translation and interpreting in this country that it's important to obviously be aware of. So this could be just one example of how they are always, let's say, enhancing or even just, let's say, overseeing the profession so that there is a certain high standard and quality maintained for anyone that is doing anything related to a NAATI certification, or sorry, I shouldn't say certification. Anyone who holds a certification is doing, let's say, work in terms of translation or interpreting up to a certain standard. And I can tell you from experience, the standard is really high because the test is rather challenging. But before we continue talking a bit about NAATI, it is important to make a distinction, because sometimes I've noticed that people ask me, teacher, are you a translator? Are you an interpreter? Or not even that. Sometimes I think a common misconception could be that maybe in some languages the word translator means to do both things, the job of an interpreter and the job of a translator. So the key distinction is that someone who is a translator basically works with the written form of a language. So think about documents, think about content in any written form, right? Whereas if somebody is an interpreter, that means that that person is working with the spoken part of that language. So think about anyone who maybe needs to go to the doctor, and that person cannot speak English well, or maybe speaks zero English. And that happens here in Australia, right? And then what would we need? We would need an interpreter. We would need someone who speaks both that person's language and, of course, English, to basically help communication occur. Because if we don't have an interpreter, it's extremely hard to communicate. So this is the biggest difference. There might be times when maybe you guys listening, you might meet someone who is a translator, who is not an interpreter, or vice versa. And there are like a million reasons why this could happen, but I'll put myself on the spot here, or basically use myself as an example. If you have been following the podcast, you know that one of my goals is certifying my level of Japanese. And if I have to be critical, I would say that in my case, I am not up there yet to be super comfortable saying that, oh, I can easily translate in Japanese, or sorry, I should say from Japanese into English, right? That's one of my goals, to improve in that aspect. And in saying that, when I have to, again, be critical, I think in my case, I feel way more comfortable with spoken Japanese And when I think about the scenario that I just told you a few minutes ago, at least for me, for Emilio, it will be much easier, I would say, to go with someone to the doctor in Australia and basically allow that interaction to happen. Whereas if you give me a medical report in Japanese and I have to write it in English, I mean, maybe I could do it, but it's gonna be quite challenging and it will take a bit of time. I guess another example could be if there is someone who, let's say for example, speaks Spanish. As all of you listening maybe know, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and French are all, part of the same language family, and therefore they're very similar. So there might be people out there who feel extremely comfortable with the spoken forms of Spanish, Portuguese, and let's say Italian for that matter. Let's say those three languages. And maybe that person can, interpret using a combination of some of them, right? And the opposite is also true. I have met people who probably speak Italian or speak Spanish, Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers, right? For this example, who can speak Italian, who can speak Portuguese, and they are not an interpreter between Italian and English or between Portuguese and English. However, that person is certified and is a translator. So basically in the written form with Italian and English and with Portuguese and English, they can act as a translator. So it really depends, because again, there are like different factors, and you can also get the case of people who really focus on two languages, usually their mother tongue and English, and then they can perform the job, or they can perform as both a translator and an interpreter, which is my case. For example, between English and Spanish, I am both a translator, both ways, so from English into Spanish or Spanish into English, and then I'm also an interpreter. So when you're an interpreter, you're basically using both. Now, I just touched up on the different, let's say, the differences between translating and interpreting. I think it is important to tell you guys not only why you will need a translator, but maybe the different types of translation that you can expect. With translation is rather straightforward because it is a matter of contacting an agency or a translator directly. All my information is in the description if you need to translate a document. And basically, you just send them your documents, ask for a quote, and then you work from then onwards. Whereas with interpreting, it can be a little bit more complicated because it is not as simple as telling someone, please come to this place at this time, which is, by the way, how we do face-to-face interpreting. We also have now with the internet, now obviously using our phones, we have remote interpreting where maybe someone goes to the doctor, has an appointment, and then the interpreter is not there. But obviously that person will be there over the phone, or maybe using a program like Zoom, or maybe Microsoft Teams, or basically any of those streaming or any of those platforms that allow people to communicate online. And then of course we have a mix, because another big part of interpreting is when you think of places like maybe the United Nations, when you think about a conference where maybe interpreters are not working in there. Let's say when someone is giving a speech, maybe the interpreter sometimes could be next to the person, but that may not always be the case. Oftentimes there is an interpreting booth. So what would happen is we have the event being held, and then people would be wearing headphones or some form of headphones or earplugs for that matter, and then the interpreter is going to be in an interpreting booth listening and translating simultaneously. So it will be like having a microphone and basically just listening and just talking in your mother tongue, or basically talking in English, whatever, or in between two languages, I should say. I'm thinking too much about, let's say two languages, because sometimes you could be interpreting between, I don't know, Spanish and German, or German and, I don't know, French, whatever the case may be. So the point is that the interpreter would be in a booth, and then that person will be technically at the event, so it is in person, but it is not in person, face to face, in the sense that they are next to the person they are interpreting to. Okay, all this, you might be listening to all this, and then you might be thinking, why do we need a translator and an interpreter? I think we covered that pretty much by saying how in certain situations you basically need to have someone to be there to help you out. With interpreting, it's rather clear. But also with translation, it might be the case that for the most part, someone needs to either bring a document into Australia or perhaps take a document from Australia to another country. And for that matter, somebody would need, or any person would need, a NAATI translator because, well, to put it simply, a NAATI translator, as I said before, shows or tells whoever needs to give that document to the Australian government or to a company in Australia. Basically, having the NAATI certified stamp is going to give people peace of mind, is going to tell them that there is a certain level of professionalism that is expected and that would be there, right? So I think the easiest way to put it is, let's say, peace of mind. Because when you think about it, there are so many different organizations in so many different areas of knowledge. Like, for example, we have Engineers Australia for engineers. There is also the Australian Computer Society for those of you who are in IT, and the list goes on and on and on. So I suppose why? Well, because again, usually when we are translating documents, we are talking about serious things, or like, let's say, very important personal documents, personal information, and we want someone who is at a certain level to manage, to deal with that information, and we want someone who is capable. This reminds me of one time when I did not pass my translation test. If you have been following the podcast, you probably know what I'm talking about. Basically, touching up in the Killing the Dragon series. I remember telling a friend, and this was just me just sharing, my experience. Obviously, no one likes to fail any exam, right? And it was, a big hit, let's say, because it was like almost a pass, right? And I was just, not complaining, but sharing this experience. And my friend said, well, Emilio, but if I am getting someone, by the way, this friend is also an immigrant, right? So this person was telling me, look, Emilio, it makes sense, I feel you, but it's also very important that these guys are super strict with their testing, because I don't want to give my documents to any person. I don't want to give my personal information in the form of a document or in the form of a report from a company or a financial statement for that matter, or whatever the case may be. I don't want to give my documents to someone who is maybe not qualified or who is not ready to handle that information. Because if I am sending, for example, a letter, or if I am translating a report and I'm using that to apply for a visa, right? This friend, by the way, was, and this is not only for this friend, but this could be with anyone. This person was trying, or in the process, I should say, to get PR. So imagine you are in the process of getting your PR, you are in the process of maybe extending a visa, you are maybe in the process of applying for a visa. The last thing you want is for the government, let's say, to question how good that document is. Or imagine what happens if the translator is not certified, makes a mistake, and then boom, your visa is cancelled. That would be like probably the worst case scenario, and that's what my friend was saying. I would happily pay a bit more and make sure that I know that whoever is doing my translation is going to do a very good job. And when that friend said that to me, it made a lot of sense. Then I said to my friend, well, yeah, it's almost like a pilot, right? Like, we want to make sure that whoever is taking care of a plane or a flight, we want someone who's qualified. And the list goes on and on. It could apply to so many different skills, trades, and professions. So this is probably why we would need a NAATI translation. It's also, I think, the short answer for peace of mind, right? Then we have the when, and I've already touched up on this. Basically, we need a translator usually when we are talking about migration, anything to do with bringing documents into Australia, or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe there are documents from Australia that we are sending overseas. A common example could be also for Australians who want to go overseas and they want to apply for a visa. They may need to provide certain documentation, and it may speed up the process. When you think about it, I mean, maybe not everyone can be in the capacity of saying, okay, I'm gonna take a visa to visit another country. For this case, let's say, I don't know, Mexico, right? For example, I don't even know if Australians need a visa for Mexico, but follow me with this one. Let's imagine that Aussies need a visa to go to Mexico, right? And then they have certain documents that they need. And then maybe Mexico has also its own NAATI organization, right? Their organization that checks translation and interpreting in Mexico. But maybe for, you know, this person in Australia, maybe it's gonna be a bit hard. Maybe that person doesn't speak Spanish. Maybe that person has never been to Mexico before. How is that person going to, you know, find a translator in Mexico that will help them? I mean, I guess it is possible, but it's just a bit more difficult, right? Especially when you think of like different languages or different cultures where like there is a big gap, right? Or a big difference, I should say. So I guess this is where having a NAATI translator is also peace of mind for that person who wants to go to Mexico, because then, you know, they can do all their documentations, all the processes here in Australia, and then that should be all good, and then they can, you know, continue their application process and whatnot. So again, in and out of Australia. And the other one, which could be a big one, and this could be maybe a bit more with interpreting, is when we're dealing with anything to do with the Australian system. Or sorry, I should say Australian systems, as I have here. I think the most common examples could be with anything related to legal matters, like if, for example, somebody, I don't know, let's say engages with the police in one shape or form. It could be like maybe somebody receives a fine and has to go to court, or somebody has to go to court for, again, whatever reason. It could also be maybe simply because of like matters to do with employment. Maybe someone needs to get a document translated for whatever reason. It could also be people who maybe have questions about the tax system. And then, you know, in many cases I've had students asking me, Emilio, how do I make my TFN? Or Emilio, is this okay with the ATO? Or I'm not sure about this and this and this in terms of my taxes. And I mean, because I cannot give financial advice, I always tell them best thing to do is you have to call the ATO. And then they say to me, yes, but you know, I don't feel comfortable. I don't like to talk to people on the phone. I think I need to improve my English to talk about taxes. And the good news is that there is an interpreter service for free when you are calling the ATO. And then that happens not only with the ATO, but with other services as well. And again, the other one could be the healthcare system. So think about anyone who maybe needs to go to the doctor, anyone who needs to talk to a counselor, a psychologist, basically engaging with a health professional. Then, you know, there is that extra support in case anybody needs help. To give you a really good example, well, good and bad example, many years ago, I feel so old if I say many years ago, but anyways, many years ago, I had an accident on my bicycle. I got hit by a car. Luckily, everything went well, right? And when I was in hospital, I remember that I received a bunch of documents from TAC, the Transit Accident Commission, and someone came to talk to me, gave me all these documents and said, hey, Emilio, do you need an interpreter or do you need a translator? Do you need any of this extra help? Because imagine you are dealing with someone whose first language is not English, who had an accident, and maybe, you know, obviously, at least not obviously, but I was clearly nervous. So I remember just going, please, 1 second, I think I don't need it, but just talk to me slowly. So it really depends, you know. It could also be the case that at the time I could have said, yes, I want an interpreter. I can speak English, but I want just to double check things. So it is also a matter of taking things on a case-by-case basis. But again, these are probably, I would say, the most common situations that are going to be the cases when people use or engage with a translator or an interpreter in Australia. And having said all that, I have to say also big thank you for your support. I really appreciate your feedback, your messages, your comments. More episodes will come up. And remember, if now you need help, not only with anything to do with test preparation, but also if you need any translations, any documents that you need to send to basically apply for a visa, extend your visa, etc. Whatever the case may be, because there are many different cases, best thing to do is to get in touch. You could shoot me an email. You could basically send me the documents. You could get in touch via social media, WhatsApp. I'll do my best to be as responsive as I can, and then I can help you out. And also, big thank you to you guys for spreading the word, because again, that's a fantastic way to support the podcast. It's been, you know, a few busy weeks in terms of assignments, in terms of, you know, responsibilities, and also in terms of translation work. So I am beyond excited, beyond grateful, and I really appreciate your support. Remember that if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a review on Spotify if you're on Spotify, but if you're watching this on YouTube, let me know what you think. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave me a comment down below. And of course, subscribe to the channel because all of these things support the podcast. And with all that said, I want to say a big thank you for joining us. More interviews to come, but as I have been saying, this year has been good busy, good crazy, and well, we gotta go little by little, getting one boss at a time. And once again, thank you for letting me be part of your day. I really enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I'll see you in the next one. So don't miss me too much. Take care and bye for now. See ya.